My name is Gerald Hensley. I'm 72. Most mornings I wake up around 6:30. No alarm clock, I just wake up. Decades in the police force, you develop a kind of internal clock. First thing I do is make coffee. Black, 2 sugars always. My apartment is small, but it suits me. Everything has its place. I like things neat. After the coffee's ready, I sit at my kitchen table. I read the newspaper cover to cover. Local news first, then national, then the sports. I don't care much for sports, but I read it anyway. It's a habit. After the paper, I write out my to-do list for the day. Usually it's just small things. Groceries, maybe a trip to the library, sometimes a visit to the park. I like the routine. It's peaceful. It's a good life. Simple. Ordered. After all those years on the force dealing with, well, the mess of it all, the quiet is nice. I appreciate it. I earned it. Tuesdays I take the train to visit my daughter. She lives a few towns over. The station is always crowded in the mornings. People rushing to work, pushing, shoving. I usually get there early to avoid the worst of it. This Tuesday was no different. I stood near the wall out of the main flow, just watching the crowd, thinking about what my daughter and I would have for lunch. She makes a good lasagna. Then I felt a shove. Hard. I stumbled a bit, nearly lost my balance. A young man in a police uniform was pushing past me. He didn't look back, he just kept going, muttering something. "Mummy, you're in my way," I heard him say. "Mummy." He called me Mummy. I looked up at him. He was tall, clean-shaven, uniform crisp, a smirk on his face like he enjoyed shoving me. A few people nearby laughed. I felt my face flush. It wasn't the shove itself. It was the casual disrespect. The smirk, the laughter, the mummy comment, like I was some doddering old fool. I adjusted my hat. I straightened my jacket. I took a deep breath. I didn't say anything, just watched him go. His name tag read Clark. Officer Clark. He seemed so young, so sure of himself, so arrogant. I stood there on the platform, didn't move, just watched the train pull in. People surged forward. I let them go ahead. I wasn't in a hurry, or at least I told myself I was. Truth was, I felt a knot in my throat, tight, like I couldn't swallow. My face was still hot. I could still hear the laughter. Mummy. The word echoed in my head, Mummy. I'm Gerald Hensley, not Mummy. I spent 30 years on the police force, worked my way up to commissioner, saw things you wouldn't believe, dealt with the worst of the worst, earned the respect of every officer in the city. And now some young punk in a uniform calls me Mummy. Like I'm some frail old woman. I clenched my fists. My knuckles went white. I don't know what I wanted to do. Yell at him, hit him, something. Anything to wipe that smirk off his face. But I didn't. I just stood there, silent, stoic, like it didn't bother me, like I was above it. But inside I was furious. Humiliated. It wasn't the shove. It was the dismissal. The casual cruelty, the assumption that I was nothing, invisible, just another old man in the way. It burned deep. I took another deep breath. The train doors opened. I stepped inside, found a seat, stared out the window. The scenery blurred. All I could see was Clark's face, that smirk. Mummy. The knot in my throat tightened. The train rattled along. I closed my eyes. Clark's face was still there. Mummy. Then other faces started to appear, faces from my past. I saw myself, younger, standing in a briefing room, a map of the city on the wall behind me. I was pointing to different locations, explaining the strategy for a major drug bust. Officers, detectives, all listening intently. Hanging on my every word, Commissioner Hensley. That's who I was, not Mummy. I remembered another time, a late-night interrogation. A suspect sweating under the bright lights. I was calm, controlled, asking questions, probing, getting the truth. He confessed. He broke. Because he knew I wouldn't give up. He knew I was in charge. He respected that. Then another memory, a press conference. Cameras flashing. Reporters shouting questions. I stood at the podium, speaking clearly, confidently. Announcing the takedown of a major corruption ring within the department. Cleaning house. Making the city safer. That was my job. That was my life. Respect, authority, responsibility. These were the things that defined me, not weakness, not frailty, not mummy. I opened my eyes. The train was pulling into my daughter's station. I stood up. My legs felt a little shaky. All those memories, all that weight, decades of service, decades of earning respect, and it all felt diminished, erased, by a single word, by a single smirk, by a young officer who didn't know anything, who hadn't seen anything, who hadn't earned anything. He had no idea who I was. He had no idea what I had done. He saw an old man, a mummy. He didn't see the commissioner. He didn't see the years of experience. He didn't see the strength. He just saw weakness. And that more than anything made me angry. I got off the train, walked to my daughter's house. We had lasagna just like I thought we would. We talked about her work, about her kids. I tried to focus, tried to be present, but Clark's face kept intruding, that smirk. Mummy. I smiled, I nodded, I answered her questions. But inside, the anger was growing. It wasn't hot anger, it was cold, quiet, like ice. It wasn't just about me. It was about more than that. I'd seen that kind of arrogance before, in young officers, thinking they knew everything, thinking they were invincible, thinking the rules didn't apply to them. I'd spent my career fighting that kind of attitude, rooting it out, holding people accountable, and now here it was again, in a different uniform, a different face. But the same arrogance, the same casual disregard for experience, for authority, for decency. I thought about all the officers I'd mentored, the ones who'd listened, who'd de-learned, who'd become good cops, respectful, responsible. Clark wasn't one of them. He was the kind I'd always had to watch out for, the kind that could cause real damage to the department, to the city, to the people he was supposed to protect. I couldn't let it stand. I wouldn't. It wasn't just about the insult. It was about the principle. It was about upholding the standards I'd spent my life defending. I pushed my lasagna around on my plate. My daughter asked if I was feeling all right. I told her I was fine, just a little tired. I lied. I wasn't tired, I was focused. I had a decision to make, a plan to formulate. I wasn't a victim, not anymore. I was a police commissioner, retired, yes, but still a commissioner. And I knew what to do. I just needed to figure out how to do it, quietly, methodically, effectively. Clark had no idea who he'd messed with. He thought I was just an old woman, a mummy. He was about to learn differently. I sat in my chair by the window, sunlight warm on my face. Quiet, peaceful, this is what I'd worked for, 30 years on the force, for this quiet, this peace. And now this Clark situation. Do I really want to disrupt it all? Start a fight? It would take time, effort. I'd have to think, plan. I'd have to dig up the old ways, the old habits. I'd have to be the commissioner again. Not just Gerald Hensley, the retired old man. Is it worth it? Just for some young punk's disrespectful comment. I closed my eyes, thought about my routine, my coffee, my newspaper, my trips to the library, my visits with my daughter. It's a good life. Simple, I like simple. I've had enough complications, enough stress, enough mess. But then I thought about Clark, that smirk, that arrogance, the way he dismissed me like I was nothing, and the laughter, the others laughing along with him like it was a joke. Like disrespecting an old man was funny. It wasn't funny. It was wrong. And I knew deep down I couldn't let it go. It wasn't just about me. It was about the principle of the thing, about respect, about accountability, about not letting that kind of behavior go unchecked. I thought about all the young officers I'd trained, the good ones, the ones who understood what it meant to wear the uniform, what it meant to serve. Clark didn't understand. He thought the uniform gave him power, gave him the right to treat people like I was nothing. He was wrong. The uniform comes with responsibility, with accountability. He needed to learn that. Someone needed to teach him. And maybe that someone was me. I opened my eyes. The sun was still shining. The room was still quiet, but something had shifted inside me. The anger was still there, but now it was focused, controlled. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was resolve. I knew what I had to do. It wouldn't be easy. It would disrupt my peaceful retirement, but it was the right thing to do, not just for me, but for everyone, for the department, for the city, for all the mummies out there who deserved respect. I took a deep breath. Made up my mind. Clark had made a mistake, a big one. He thought he was dealing with a weak old man. He was about to find out he was wrong. He was about to find out who I really am. I finished my coffee, rinsed the mug, put it in the drainer, everything in its place. I went to the window, looked out at the street below, people going about their day. Normal, ordinary, my life was like that. Normal, ordered, quiet, it was good, but it wasn't right, not yet. Not while Clark was out there, walking around like he owned the place, like he could treat people any way he wanted, like he was above the rules. He was. Nobody was. I'd spent my career enforcing the rules, holding people accountable, making sure everyone played fair. I wasn't going to stop now, not because I was retired, not because I was older, not because some young punk called me mummy. That wasn't the reason. The reason was order. Justice, things needed to be right, and I was the one who could make them right. I knew it. I felt it in my gut. That same feeling I used to get before a big case, a sense of purpose, a quiet determination. I wasn't doing this for revenge. That wasn't it. This wasn't personal. Not really. It was about something bigger, about the principle of the thing, about sending a message that nobody, not even a police officer, was above the law. A message that respect had to be earned. A message that actions had consequences. Clark needed to learn that lesson, and I was going to teach it to him. I turned away from the window, walked over to my desk, sat down, opened a drawer. Inside, beneath a stack of old photographs, was a leather-bound notebook. My notebook. The one I used to use during investigations. I hadn't touched it in years, but now I needed it. I picked it up. Ran my hand over the worn leather. It felt familiar, comforting, like an old friend. I opened it to the first blank page, picked up a pen, and I started to write. Officer Clark. That's all I wrote, just his name, but it was enough. It was a start. It was a commitment, a silent verdict. I was going to do this. I was going to bring Clark down, not for me, but for everyone, for the city, for the department, for order, for justice. For the quiet dignity of knowing that things were right. I closed the notebook, put it back in the drawer. I didn't need to write anything else. Not yet. I knew what I had to do. The plan was already forming in my mind. Slowly, methodically. Like a spider spinning a web. Clark wouldn't see it coming. He thought he'd dismissed me as a mummy. He was wrong. He just awakened something. Something he couldn't control. Something he wouldn't understand. He was going to learn. He was going to learn who I really am. I started taking the train again. Same time every morning, not to visit my daughter. This was different. I sat near the back, kept my head down, pretended to read the paper, but I was watching. Watching Clark. He always arrived at the last minute, rushing, pushing, just like before, same smirk, same swagger. He held himself like he owned the place, like he was better than everyone else. He talked loudly, laughed too much. Tried to impress the other officers, mostly younger ones. They seemed to look up to him. That bothered me. He wasn't a good example, not the kind of officer I wanted representing the department. I watched him interact with the commuters. Impatient, dismissive, like they were all just obstacles in his way. He didn't see them as people, just things. I started noticing patterns. He always bought coffee from the same kiosk. Black, no sugar. He always stood on the same part of the platform, near the front, close to the action. He always checked his phone just before the train arrived, like he was expecting an important call. He never got one. I watched his interactions. With his colleagues, he bragged a lot, about arrests he'd made, about commendations he'd received. I doubted half of it was true, but the young officers seemed to believe him. They hung on his every word. He preened, like a peacock. Showing off his feathers, I noticed something else. He cut corners, little things, not following proper procedure, ignoring regulations, things he thought nobody would notice. But I noticed. I'd seen it all before. That kind of casual disregard for the rules, it always led to bigger problems. I wasn't looking for physical weaknesses. I wasn't interested in that. I was looking for cracks, cracks in his professional facade, weaknesses in his character. Things I could use, things I could exploit. I wasn't looking for revenge, not exactly. I was looking for accountability, for justice, for order. Clark thought he was invincible. He thought he could get away with anything. He was wrong. He was about to learn a valuable lesson, a lesson I was uniquely qualified to teach. I kept watching, kept observing, kept gathering information, like pieces of a puzzle, slowly, methodically. I was building a case, not a criminal case. Not this time. This was something different. This was about exposing the rot, the arrogance, the corruption of character. Clark thought he was playing a game. He didn't realize I was playing too, and I was playing to win. I went to the spare bedroom. It's mostly storage now. Boxes stacked against the walls, old furniture covered in sheets, dust motes dancing in the sunlight. I hadn't been in here much since my wife passed. She used this room as her sewing room. I could still smell her perfume, faint like a ghost. I pushed a few boxes aside, revealed a metal filing cabinet, heavy, gray. I hadn't opened it in years. It was locked. I found the key on my keychain, small, brass. It fit. I turned the key, heard the tumblers click, pulled open the top drawer. It was full of files, old cases, investigations I'd led, reports I'd written, evidence I'd collected, years of my life condensed into paper. I ran my hand over the file folders. The labels were typed neat, each one a story, a puzzle I'd solved, a wrong I'd righted. I pulled out a random file, opened it. Inside were photographs, crime scene photos, gruesome but familiar. I remembered the case. A robbery gone wrong. 2 victims, young couple, senseless. I'd caught the guy, put him away for life. It was good work. Important work. I closed the file, put it back, pulled out another one. This one was thicker. A corruption case. Inside the department. Dirty cops taking bribes, protecting criminals. I'd spent months on that one, working undercover, gathering evidence, building a case. It was dangerous, but I did it. I brought them down, all of them. Cleaned up the department, made it better, stronger, more honest. I closed the file, put it back. I didn't need to read the details. I remembered them, everyone. These weren't just files. They were me. They were a part of who I was. A part I'd forgotten. A part I'd buried under the routine of retirement, the coffee, the newspaper, the quiet. I'd needed that quiet after all those years of chaos. But now I needed something else. I needed purpose. I needed to be the commissioner again. Not for myself, but for Clark. He needed to learn. He needed to understand. He needed to be held accountable. And I was the one who could do it. I pulled out another file. This one was empty. Blank pages, waiting to be filled. I picked up a pen, felt the weight of it in my hand. Familiar, comforting. This was my tool, my weapon. Not a gun, not a badge, but a pen. And a notebook. And the knowledge, the experience, the years of training. The quiet competence that came from a lifetime of service. I was ready. I was the commissioner again. I sat at my desk. The old files spread out in front of me. Cases I'd worked on. Criminals I'd caught. Corruption I'd exposed. Years of police work. A lifetime of service. And now this Clark situation. It felt small, insignificant compared to some of the things I'd dealt with. But it wasn't small, not really. It was important. It was about principle, about accountability, about not letting arrogance go unchecked. I looked through the files, read the reports, studied the EVI. Dense, looking for, I don't know what I was looking for, a pattern, a connection. A way to use my experience to what? To teach Clark a lesson, to get him fired. No, that wasn't it. I didn't want revenge. I wanted justice. I wanted him to understand, to learn, to be better. But how? How could I do that? I couldn't just confront him. That wouldn't work. He'd deny it, laugh it off. He'd think I was just a senile old man, a mummy. I needed something more. Something concrete, something undeniable. I rubbed my eyes, tired, frustrated. I'd been at this for days, going through the old files, watching Clark, taking notes, getting nowhere. Then it hit me, like a bolt of lightning, a sudden clarity. I knew what to do. I knew how to use Clark's arrogance against him, his swagger, his overconfidence, his belief that he was above the rules. That was his weakness, and I was going to exploit it. I wasn't going to confront him. Not directly. I was going to document meticulously, thoroughly. I was going to build a case, just like I'd done 100 times before. But this time the case wasn't about a crime. It was about Clark, about his behavior, about his disregard for the rules. I'd seen it, I'd witnessed it, I'd documented it. His casual disregard for procedure, his bending of the rules. The little things he thought nobody noticed. I noticed. And I was going to make sure others noticed too. I wasn't going to go to him. Not yet. I was going to go higher. I was going to go through the proper channels, internal affairs. They'd investigate. They'd find the evidence. They'd see what I saw. And Clark would be exposed, not for the shove, not for the insult, but for his actions, for his arrogance, for his belief that he was above the law. He was. Nobody was. And I was going to make sure he learned that lesson. The plan was simple, elegant, effective. It played to my strengths, my experience, my knowledge of the system, my meticulous nature. And it played to Clark's weaknesses, his arrogance, his carelessness, his belief that he was untouchable. He was about to learn. He was about to learn who he was dealing with. He thought I was just an old man, a mummy. He was wrong. I was a police commissioner. And I was about to teach him a lesson he'd never forget. I needed evidence, something concrete, something I could use. I remembered one of Clark's boasts. He talked about a recent arrest. Drug bust. Big deal, he'd said. He'd been the one to make the arrest. Single-handedly, he'd claimed. I remembered thinking it sounded improbable, too neat, too perfect, like something out of a movie. I decided to check the records, not the official ones. Not yet. I started with the station's internal log, daily reports, incident summaries, things like that. I knew a guy, desk sergeant, been there for years, good man, reliable. I called him, told him I was researching a case, needed some information. He didn't ask questions, he knew better. He knew who I was. He pulled the log for the date Clark had mentioned, made a copy, slipped it to me the next day. I thanked him, didn't say much else, didn't want to arouse suspicion. I went home, sat at my desk, spread the log out in front of me, started reading, line by line, looking for Clark's name, found it. There it was, the arrest he'd bragged about, but something wasn't right. The details didn't match his story, not exactly. He declaimed he'd acted alone. The log said there were 2 other officers present. He declaimed he'd confiscated a large quantity of drugs. The log mentioned a much smaller amount. He declaimed the suspect had resisted arrest. The log made no mention of that. Interesting, very interesting. I read the entry again, carefully, slowly. Then I looked at the signature at the bottom, Clark's signature, sloppy, hurried, like he hadn't even bothered to read what he was signing. I smiled. This was it. This was the first piece. The first crack in Clark's carefully constructed facade. I made a copy of the log entry, put the original back in the folder. I didn't want anyone to know I'd been looking. Not yet. I slipped the copy into my notebook. Safe, secure, evidence. It wasn't much, not on its own, but it was a start. A small detail, a discrepancy, something Clark wouldn't even notice. Was missing. He was too careless, too arrogant. He thought he was untouchable. He was. I had him now. I had the first piece of the puzzle, and I knew where to find the rest. It would take time, patience, meticulous work, but I had time. And I had patience, and I was meticulous. This was my game now, and I was going to play it to win. I started showing up at the station more often. Not every day, just enough to be noticed. I'd sit on one of the benches in the waiting area, pretend to read a book, but I was watching, always watching. Clark, his colleagues, the other officers. I'd let my shoulders slump a bit, walk a little slower than usual, fumble with my glasses, play the part of the harmless old man, the slightly doddering retiree. Nobody paid me much attention, which was exactly what I wanted. I'd overhear conversations, snippets of information, little details, things Clark and his friends said when they thought nobody was listening. I'd cough a little, mumble to myself, make myself seem insignificant, invisible, like I wasn't even there. It worked. They ignored me, dismissed me, just like Clark had done on the platform. It stung a little. But I reminded myself it was all part of the plan. I needed them to underestimate me, to see me as nothing more than a harmless old fool. One time, Clark walked right past me, almost bumped into me. He didn't even apologize, just muttered something under his breath. I think it was "Watch it, Gramps." I pretended not to hear, just smiled vaguely, nodded, like I was a little confused. He smirked, walked away, shaking his head. Like I was a nuisance, another obstacle in his path. He had no idea who I was, no idea what I was doing. He thought he was so clever, so superior. He thought I was just a mummy. He was wrong. I was playing a game. A long game, and he was just a pawn. I started engaging in small talk with the other officers, with the desk sergeants, with anyone who'd listen. I'd ask about the weather, complain about my aching joints, tell stories about my grandkids. Boring stuff, mundane, but it served a purpose. It reinforced the image, the harmless old man, the slightly confused retiree. Nobody suspected a thing. They thought I was just lonely, looking for someone to talk to. They were happy to indulge me. They'd pat me on the shoulder, tell me to take care, treat me like a child. It was condescending, patronizing, but it worked. It lowered their guard. It made them think I was harmless, insignificant. I'd ask seemingly innocent questions about Clark, about his work, about his reputation. They'd detail me, thinking they were just humoring an old man. They'd talk about Clark's arrests, his commendations, his heroics. I'd listen, nod, smile, pretend to be impressed, but inside I was taking notes. Mental notes, connecting the dots, building my case piece by piece, slowly, methodically, like a spider spinning a web. Clark was caught in that web. He just didn't know it yet. He thought he was free. He thought he was in control. He was wrong. I was in control. I was pulling the strings, and he was dancing to my tune. He just didn't know it yet. He thought I was a mummy. He was about to learn differently. He was about to learn who I really am. I sat at my desk. The file was thick, pages and pages of notes, dates, times, witness statements, copies of reports, everything I'd collected, everything I'd documented. Clark's sloppy work, his corner cutting, his disregard for procedure. It was all there in black and white. Undeniable. I went over it again, carefully, slowly, checking every detail, making sure everything was accurate, complete, airtight. This had to be perfect. No mistakes, no room for doubt. Clark was a police officer. He'd know how to look for weaknesses, how to find loopholes. I couldn't give him any. This file had to be irrefutable. I reread the witness statements, people I'd talked to, other officers, commuters, people who'd seen Clark's behavior, his arrogance, his impatience, his casual disregard for the rules. They hadn't understood the significance of what they'd seen, but I had. I'd connected the dots, woven their observations into a tapestry of Clark's incompetence. I checked the dates, the times, made sure everything lined up. No inconsistencies, contradictions. This had to be perfect. I organized the documents, chronological order, clear, concise, easy to follow. I wanted whoever read this file to understand, to see what I saw, to see the pattern of Clark's behavior. The arrogance, the carelessness, the sense of entitlement. He thought he was above the rules. He was, nobody was, and this file was going to prove it. I put the final page in place, closed the file, held it in my hands, heavy, solid. The weight of evidence, the weight of justice. I felt a knot in my stomach, tight, not from fear, not from doubt, but from anticipation. This was it. The culmination of weeks of work, of observation, of planning, of meticulous documentation. This file was Clark's reckoning, his judgment day. He wouldn't see it coming. He thought he'd dismissed me as a harmless old man, a mummy. He was wrong. He'd underestimated me. He'd underestimated the quiet power of observation, the quiet strength of experience, the quiet determination of a man who knew what was right. I put the file on my desk, stared at it. The tension in the room was thick, palpable. Like the air before a storm. I knew what I had to do. I knew where this file needed to go, but I hesitated just for a moment, a brief flicker of doubt. Was I doing the right thing? Was this necessary? I thought about my quiet life. My routine, my peace. This was going to disrupt all of that. Bring chaos back into my ordered world. Was it worth it? I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, thought about Clark, that smirk, that arrogance, the way he'd treated me, the way he'd treated others, the casual cruelty, the sense of entitlement. It wasn't right. It couldn't stand. Someone had to do something, and that someone was me. I opened my eyes. The doubt was gone, replaced by a quiet resolve, a steely determination. I picked up the file, held it tight. This was it, the moment of truth, the setting of the stage, the final act. Clark's arrogance had brought him to this point, and now it was time for the curtain to rise. I took the train downtown. Didn't even see Clark on the platform. Good, I didn't want to see him, not yet. The Internal Affairs office was in a nondescript building. Gray, concrete, no windows, like a fortress. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The hallway was quiet, empty. I found the right office. The door was closed, a small plaque read Internal Affairs. I knocked. A voice inside said, "Come in." I opened the door. A woman sat behind a desk, middle-aged, stern face. She looked up. "Can I help you?" she asked. I held up the file. "I have a complaint," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "A complaint?" she repeated. "Against whom?" I hesitated. Just for a second, then I said, "Officer Clark." She didn't react, just nodded. "And what is the nature of your complaint?" she asked. I put the file on her desk. "It's all in there," I said. She looked at the file, thick, heavy. "This is quite a comprehensive document," she said. I nodded. "I wanted to be thorough," I said. She picked up the file, opened it, started reading. She didn't say anything, just read, page after page. I stood there, waiting, silent. The room was quiet. The only sound was the rustling of paper. After a few minutes, she looked up. Her expression hadn't changed, still stern, still unreadable. "Thank you, Mr. Hensley," she said. "We'll review this information and take appropriate action." I nodded. "Thank you," I said. I turned to leave. "Mr. Hensley," she said. I stopped, turned back. "Yes?" I asked. She looked at me, a long, steady gaze. Then she said, "We appreciate you bringing this to our attention." I nodded again, said nothing, turned and walked out, closed the door behind me. I took the elevator back down, stepped out onto the street, took a deep breath. The air felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted. I'd done it. I'd set the wheels in motion. The bait was cast. Now all I had to do was wait for Clark to take the hook. He wouldn't see it coming. He thought he was so clever, so arrogant, so untouchable. He was wrong. He was about to learn. He was about to learn who he was dealing with. He thought I was just a mummy. He was about to find out who I really am. I went back to my routine: coffee, newspaper, Library Park. Tried to put the Clark thing out of my mind, but it was hard. I kept thinking about the file, the evidence, the woman in the Internal Affairs office, her stern face, her steady gaze. I wondered what she was thinking, what they were doing. I tried not to think about it, tried to focus on other things, but it was always there, a low hum in the background of my life, a quiet anticipation, like waiting for a storm to break. Then one day I saw him, Clark, at the station. He didn't see me. He was talking to another officer, a senior officer, a captain. I recognized him. Good man, honest, by the book. Clark was talking fast, gesturing with his hands. He looked agitated, nervous. Not his usual swaggering self. The captain was listening, nodding, but his expression was grim, serious. I watched them for a few minutes, didn't get close, didn't want to be seen, but I could tell something was wrong, something had changed. Clark's confidence was gone, replaced by fear. I saw him wipe his hand across his forehead, a nervous tic. I'd seen it before in suspects, just before they confessed. He was sweating. Even though it wasn't hot, he kept glancing around, like he expected someone to jump out and grab him. The captain put a hand on his shoulder, said something. I couldn't hear what, but Clark flinched. Like he'd been burned, he looked smaller, weaker. Not the invincible young officer I'd seen before. The captain walked away. Clark stood there for a moment, alone, head down, shoulders slumped. Like all the air had been let out of him, he looked up, scanned the crowd, his eyes met mine. Just for a second, he didn't recognize me, not really, just a fleeting glance. Then he looked away, turned and walked out of the station. I watched him go. A small, almost imperceptible smile played on my lips. The trap was closing. He was starting to feel the pressure, the weight of his actions, the consequences of his arrogance. He thought he was untouchable. He was. He thought he'd dismissed me as a mummy. He was wrong. He was about to learn. He was about to learn who I really am. The storm was coming, and Clark was right in its path. They called him into the captain's office. Clark knew something was up. He felt it for days, the looks, the whispers, the way people avoided his eyes. He tried to brush it off, told himself it was nothing, just his imagination, but it was, he knew it. He sat down across from the captain, tried to look confident, tried to maintain his usual swagger, but it was hard. His hands were shaking. He could feel the sweat trickling down his back. The captain didn't waste time. He held up a file, thick, familiar. Clark recognized it. The one the old man had given to Internal Affairs, the mummy. He felt a chill run down his spine. "Officer Clark," the captain said, his voice cold, hard, "we have a problem." Clark swallowed, tried to speak, but his throat was dry. "Sir?" He managed to croak out. The captain opened the file, started reading. Dates, times, witness statements, incident reports, all the little things. The things Clark thought nobody had noticed. The corners he'd cut, the rules he'd bent, the lies he'd told. It was all there, documented, meticulous, irrefutable. The captain looked up. His eyes were like ice. "Care to explain yourself, Officer Clark?" he asked. Clark stammered, tried to deny it, tried to make excuses. But the words wouldn't come. He knew it was useless. It was all there in black and white. He'd been caught, exposed. The captain slammed the file shut. The sound echoed in the small office. "Officer Clark," he said, his voice low, dangerous, "you're suspended." Clark's head snapped up. "Suspended," he repeated. The word hung in the air, heavy, final. The captain nodded. "Pending a full investigation," he said. "You'll surrender your badge and your weapon, effective immediately." Clark felt a wave of nausea wash over him. His badge, his weapon, his identity stripped away, just like that. He looked at the file again. The thick, heavy file that contained his downfall. He thought about the old man, the mummy. He remembered the shove, the smirk, the casual dismissal. He thought the old man was nothing, a nobody, just another obstacle in his path. He'd been wrong. Dead wrong. The old man, Gerald Hensley, he'd been the architect of his ruin. The captain said something else, something about procedures, about regulations, about the consequences of his actions. Clark barely heard him. All he could think about was Hensley, the mummy. He'd underestimated him, dismissed him, mocked him, and now he was paying the price. The humiliation was complete, full circle. He'd been brought down, not by a criminal, not by a superior officer, but by an old man, a mummy. The irony was unbearable. He stood up, numb, defeated. The mask of arrogance had fallen, shattered, revealing the fear, the shame, the realization that he'd made a terrible mistake. A mistake that had cost him everything. He walked out of the captain's office, a ghost of his former self. The smirk was gone, the swagger was gone, the confidence was gone. All that remained was the hollow echo of a single word: mummy. They brought him out into the main squad room. Clark could feel the eyes on him, all the other officers, the ones he'd bragged to, the ones he'd tried to impress. They were all watching, silent, their faces blank. He could feel the heat rising in his cheeks. Shame, humiliation. He wanted their admiration, their respect. He wanted to be seen as one of them, one of the best. Now he was being paraded in front of them like a criminal. Two uniformed officers flanked him. Their hands rested lightly on his arms, not forceful but firm, a reminder. He was no longer one of them, he was the accused. The captain stood in the center of the room, cleared his throat. The silence deepened, everyone was listening, waiting. Clark could feel their gazes, burning into him. "Officer Clark," the captain said, his voice loud, clear, echoing in the silent room, "you are hereby suspended from duty pending the outcome of an internal investigation." The words hung in the air, heavy, final, a death sentence to his career. Clark looked around at the faces of his colleagues, the ones he'd tried so hard to impress. They weren't impressed now. They were curious, intrigued. Some of them looked almost satisfied. He saw a flicker of something else in their eyes, pity. He flinched. That was worse than the satisfaction, much worse. The captain continued. "Officer Clark," he said, "you will surrender your badge and your weapon." He held out his hand, waiting. Clark hesitated, just for a second. Then he reached for his badge. The metal felt cold against his fingers. He'd worn it with pride, with a sense of belonging. Now it felt like a brand, a mark of shame. He unpinned it. His hand trembled. He placed it in the captain's outstretched palm. The sound was small, almost imperceptible, but in the silence of the room it echoed. Like a gunshot. Then his weapon. His sidearm, the familiar weight of it in his hand. He trained with it, practiced with it, relied on it. Now he had to give it up. He unholstered it, handed it over. The metal felt cold, lifeless. Like a part of him was being torn away. The captain took the weapon, placed it on a nearby table, next to the badge. Symbols of authority, symbols of power, symbols of belonging. Now they were gone. Clark stood there, empty-handed. Exposed, stripped bare. He could feel the eyes on him, watching, judging. He wanted their admiration, their respect. He wanted to be seen as one of them, one of the best. He'd achieved the opposite. He was a pariah, an outcast, a disgrace. The captain said something else. Something about the charges against him, about the evidence, about the seriousness of the situation. Clark didn't hear him. Not really. All he could hear was the silence. The heavy, oppressive silence of the room. The silence of his colleagues. The ones he'd tried so hard to impress. They weren't impressed now. They were disappointed, disgusted. And that more than anything broke him. His arrogance crumbled, shattered like glass. He'd built it up so carefully, so meticulously. The swagger, the confidence, the bravado. It was all a facade, a mask. And now the mask had fallen, revealing the fear, the shame, the humiliation. He was nothing, just Clark, the officer who'd been suspended, the officer who'd been stripped of his badge, the officer who'd been exposed. He thought he was invincible, untouchable. He thought he could get away with anything. He'd been wrong, dead wrong. He'd been checkmated. And the one who checkmated him wasn't a superior officer, wasn't a criminal mastermind. It was an old man, a mummy. The irony was crushing. The room was silent, thick, heavy silence. Nobody moved, nobody spoke, just silence. I'd seen quiet rooms before, interrogation rooms, courtrooms, hospital waiting rooms. This was different. This silence had a weight to it, a kind of stunned disbelief. Like nobody knew what to say, what to do. They'd all seen Clark's bravado, his swagger, his loud laughter, his constant boasting. He'd filled the room with his presence. Demanded attention. Now nothing, just silence. He stood there, empty-handed, head down like a deflated balloon. The air had gone out of him, the life had gone out of him. He'd been so full of himself, so sure of himself, so arrogant. Now he was just Clark, a suspended officer, stripped of his badge, stripped of his weapon, stripped of his arrogance. The other officers watched him, their faces blank, unreadable. I could see the questions in their eyes, the confusion, the disappointment. They looked up to him, some of them seen him as a role model. Now what did they think now? They didn't say anything, just watched. Silent, I looked at the captain. He stood there, impassive, waiting. For what? For someone to break the silence, for Clark to say something, for something, anything to happen. Nothing happened, just silence. The clock on the wall ticked, loud. Each tick seemed to amplify the silence, make it heavier, more oppressive. I could feel it pressing down on me, on everyone like a physical weight. The air was thick with it, heavy with it, charged with it. I'd seen a lot in my years on the force. Violence, tragedy, despair. But this silence, it was unsettling. Unnerving, it spoke volumes more than any words could have. It was the sound of the end of Clark's arrogance, the end of his swagger, the end of his reign. He'd built it up so carefully, so meticulously, brick by brick, boast by boast, lie by lie, and now it had all come crashing down in a single moment. A moment of silence, the silence of his colleagues, the silence of the room, the silence of defeat. He thought he was invincible, untouchable. He was wrong. He was just Clark, and now everyone knew it. The silence stretched on, unbroken, unending. It was the sound of the truth that Clark had been hiding, the truth that everyone had suspected, the truth that nobody wanted to say out loud. But now they didn't have to. The silence said it all, loud and clear, and in that silence I heard justice. I stayed in the back, near the door, didn't want to be seen, not yet. I watched Clark leave the station. He walked slowly, head down, shoulders slumped. Like he'd aged 10 years in the last few minutes. He didn't look up, didn't see me, almost bumped into me as he passed. I didn't move, just stood there. Silent, he stopped, looked up. His eyes met mine. No recognition at first, just confusion. Then a flicker, a spark of understanding. He knew who I was. He knew what I'd done. He knew I'd been the one to orchestrate his downfall. He didn't say anything, didn't need to. His eyes said it all, regret, shame, acceptance. A silent acknowledgement, a silent apology. I nodded, once, slowly. A silent acknowledgement in return, a silent acceptance. He looked away, walked out. Into the sunlight. A broken man, I watched him go. Didn't feel triumph, not exactly, just a quiet sense of satisfaction. Order had been restored, justice had been served. He'd learned his lesson, a hard lesson, but a necessary one. He thought he was above the rules, above the law, above me. He was wrong. He'd learned that now, and that was enough. I turned and walked away, back into the station, back into the noise, back into the world. But something had changed. Something had shifted. I wasn't just Gerald Hensley, the retired old man, anymore. I was something more, something stronger. I'd reclaimed a part of myself, a part I thought I'd lost. The part that knew how to fight, not with fists, not with weapons, but with knowledge, with experience, with quiet determination. I was the commissioner again. And that felt good. Weeks had passed. Things had settled back into their rhythm. Coffee in the morning, newspaper, my to-do list, the park, the library, my routine, my quiet life. I'd thought the Clark business would disrupt it, upend it, throw everything into chaos. It hadn't, not really. It had rippled the surface, caused a few waves, but the water had calmed again. I sat in my chair by the window. Sunlight warm on my face, just like before, but different. I couldn't quite explain it. It was like a weight had been lifted, a burden I hadn't even realized I was carrying. I thought about Clark. I hadn't seen him since that day at the station. I didn't know what had happened to him. Didn't care, really. It wasn't about him. Not anymore. It was about something else. About principle, about accountability. About standing up for what was right. I'd done that, quietly, methodically, effectively. I hadn't sought revenge. That wasn't it. I'd sought justice, order, a restoration of balance, and I'd achieved it. I felt a sense of satisfaction, deep, quiet. Not the fleeting satisfaction of winning a fight, but the lasting satisfaction of knowing you done the right thing, the necessary thing. I hadn't enjoyed bringing Clark down, not really. It had been a duty, a responsibility, something I had to do. Not for myself, but for the department, for the city, for everyone who'd ever been dismissed, disrespected, treated like nothing. I thought about the word, mummy. It still stung a little, but not as much. It didn't define me, not anymore. I'd reclaimed my identity, my sense of self, my worth. I was Gerald Hensley, retired police commissioner, a man of substance, a man of principle, a man who knew right from wrong, and a man who wasn't afraid to stand up for what was right. even if it meant disrupting his quiet life, even if it meant facing down arrogance, even if it meant taking on a young officer who thought he was invincible. I took a deep breath. The air felt clean, fresh, like the air after a storm. The storm had passed, the waters had calmed, and I was at peace, a deeper peace than before, a peace that came from knowing I'd done the right thing, a peace that came from knowing I was still the commissioner. Even in retirement, I closed my eyes, listened to the sounds of the city, the traffic, the sirens, the distant rumble of the train, the sounds of life going on as it should, order restored, justice served, balance regained, and me back in my quiet place, my peaceful routine, my simple life, but now with a renewed sense of purpose, a quiet confidence, a deep, abiding satisfaction. I opened my eyes, smiled, sipped my coffee, black, 2 sugars, always. The world was right again. And so was I. The leaves were turning. Reds and yellows, a crispness in the air, fall, my favorite time of year. I sat on my park bench, feeding the pigeons. Same as I always did. Same bench, same time of day. Same brand of birdseed, routine. I liked routine. It was comforting. I watched the pigeons peck at the seeds. Gray, ordinary like me. I smiled. I was ordinary again. Back to my normal life. My quiet retirement, the coffee, the newspaper, the library, the park. The same things I'd always done, but different, subtly different. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. It was like a layer of dust had been brushed away, revealing something brighter, shinier, beneath. I felt lighter, freer, more myself. The Clark business, it was over, done, finished. A closed chapter. I didn't think about it much anymore. Occasionally it would flicker across my mind. A brief image, Clark's face, the captain's stern voice, the silence of the squad room, but it didn't linger, it didn't bother me. It was in the past, where it belonged. I dealt with it. Dealt with it the way I knew how, quietly, methodically, effectively. I'd restored order, restored balance, restored justice. And in doing so, I'd restored myself. I'd reclaimed a part of me I thought I'd lost. The part that knew how to act, how to fight, not with fists, not with weapons, but with knowledge, with experience, with quiet determination. I was still the commissioner, even in retirement, even feeding pigeons in tea. Park, I knew it, I felt it, a quiet confidence, a deep, abiding strength. I wasn't just Gerald Hensley, the retired old man anymore. I was something more, something better. I'd faced down arrogance, faced down disrespect, faced down myself, and I'd won, not by shouting, not by demanding, but by being me. Gerald Hensley, the man who knew right from wrong, the man who wasn't afraid to stand up for what was right. The man who quietly restored order. I finished feeding the pigeons, brushed the crumbs from my hands, stood up, walked away, back to my quiet life, my peaceful routine, my simple pleasures, but now with a renewed sense of dignity, a quiet confidence, a deep, abiding peace. The world was right again, and so was I. Well, hello there, I'm Gerald Hensley. You've heard my story about the young officer, about the incident, about how I handled it. I wanted to share a few final thoughts about respect, about experience, about standing up for yourself. You see, I believe everyone deserves respect. Young or old, rich or poor, doesn't matter, respect is fundamental. It's about recognizing the inherent worth of every individual. It's about treating people with dignity, with courtesy, with basic human decency, and experience matters. It's not about age, not exactly. It's about what you've seen, what you've done, what you've learned. It's about the wisdom that comes from living, from making mistakes, from overcoming challenges, from simply being in the world. Young people, they have a lot to learn. That's not a criticism, it's just a fact. They haven't seen what we've seen. They haven't done what we've done. They haven't lived what we've lived. And that's okay. They'll learn, in time. But in the meantime, we need to teach them. We need to show them. We need to guide them. And sometimes that means standing up for ourselves. Standing up for what we believe in. Standing up for respect. It's not always easy, I know. It takes courage, it takes strength. but it's important. It's essential, because if we don't stand up for ourselves, who will? Nobody. Nobody will. We have to do it ourselves. We have to be our own advocates, our own champions. We have to demand respect, not by shouting, not by demanding, but by being ourselves, by being worthy of respect. And that comes from within. It comes from knowing who you are, knowing what you stand for, knowing your own worth. Don't let anyone dismiss you. Don't let anyone disrespect you. Don't let anyone make you feel less than. You are valuable. You are important. You are worthy. Remember that always. And if someone forgets, remind them. Quietly, firmly, respectfully. But remind them, because respect, it's not given, it's earned. And sometimes you have to fight for it. Not with fists, not with weapons, but with dignity, with integrity, with quiet strength. The strength that comes from knowing who you are, and knowing you deserve respect. Now, if you've enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. Thank you for watching. And remember, never let anyone make you feel like you're less than. You are worthy. You are important. You are enough. Always.